Listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to True Crime, the podcast that helps you find new, emerging, and undiscovered true crime podcasts. I'm Greg, the host and curator of True Crime. Today's episode is from Enmeshed. Enmeshed is a true crime podcast covering cases of families committing crimes together or against each other. If you like today's episode, make sure to check out the episode description for links to subscribe. All right, let's get this show started.
Begin.
On Enmeshed, we discuss crimes and situations that may be disturbing for some audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Enmeshed, the show that reveals some of the most poisonous people come disguised as family.
Enmeshed family members are fused together by unhealthy emotions instead of the strong bonds that signal a well-functioning family. Boundaries are blurred and unhealthy relationship patterns are formed. Hello, and welcome to Enmeshed, the podcast that explores family relationships and crime. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Pam.
And today we are covering the widely known case of two cousins, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr., who terrorized Los Angeles, California in the late 1970s. They were labeled as serial killers, serial rapists, pedophiles, and ephebophiles, which is having an unhealthy attraction to adolescents ages 15 to 19. This sick killer team who inspired books, film adaptations, and documentaries is best known as the Hillside Strangler.
I know it's a popular case for podcasters, but we're not going to be left out of telling the story of these enmeshed cousins.
All right, so let's set the stage. For 4 months, the hills of LA were littered with the bodies of women and girls aged 12 to 28. Although their murders were the work of two insatiable killer cousins, they are collectively recognized as a single monster called the Hillside Strangler. From late 1977 until early 1978, the Hillside Strangler was the boogeyman of Southern California. At the time, the media assumed the murders were perpetrated by one person. Almost no one believed two people would actually work together to commit such heinous crimes, but these sadistic serial killers were more than happy to team up, albeit they had committed plenty of crimes on their own. The biologically related cousins, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono Jr., also known as the Italian Stallion, were two very different kinds of killers. Buono seemed content to go after whoever happened to cross his path, but for Bianchi, the killing spree was all about control. At first, they targeted random sex workers, but as their infamy grew, the pair began taking on more conspicuous and challenging victims. They even killed one victim inside Bianchi's apartment.
Their murder spree lasted less than a year, but the Hillside Strangler is still known as the most vicious California serial killers of all time.
Let's go back to the beginning and get some background on these fellows. Angelo Buono Jr. was born in Rochester, New York on October 5, 1934. His parents were Italian immigrants who divorced when he was young. When Buono was 5, he moved to Glendale, California with his mother Jenny and his sister Cecilia. He displayed a high interest in sex at a young age, and when he was a teenager, he claimed to his classmates to have raped several girls. Buono also idolized serial rapist Carol Chessman, aka the Red Light Bandit, considering him his hero, even though he believed that Chessman should have also killed his victims. Buono began stealing cars and was placed in reform school. In 1955, he married his high school sweetheart, 17-year-old Geraldine Vinal, whom he had impregnated but left her less than a week after they were married. Buono and Geraldine's child, named Michael, was later born on January 10, 1956, but Buono divorced her and refused to pay child support for Michael. Later on, he married Mary Castillo, whom he also impregnated earlier on and fathered a total of 5 children with her.
Wow.
In 1964, Buono was believed to have raped his 2-year-old daughter Grace, although there isn't enough information from sources to elaborate upon the incident. Buono and Mary's marriage also ended in divorce in 1964. She claimed that he had been physically and sexually abusive. She had tried to reconcile with him, but after he handcuffed and threatened her at gunpoint, she abandoned those intentions. Buono got married a 3rd time the following year to a single mother named Nanette Campino and had 2 children with her. On an unspecified date, Buono was arrested for stealing cars and sentenced to 1 year in prison, but due to his large family, the sentence was suspended so he could work. Nanette later divorced him in 1971, like his previous 2 wives, not only because he was abusing her, but also because he raped their daughter.
Oh my God, that's some bullshit. Stop it, dude.
The following year, Buono married once again to a woman named Deborah Taylor, but strangely didn't live with her. He became a car upholsterer in 1975 and was, despite his physical appearance and abusive behavior, considered very attractive to women. During that time, Buono frequently forced women to perform oral sex on him and also started dating a teenage girl whom he impregnated twice.
My goodness. Was there birth control in California in the 70s, or maybe some help for sex addiction?
Like his cousin Buono, Kenneth Bianchi was born in Rochester, New York. He was born on May 22, 1951, almost 17 years after his cousin. His mother, a 17-year-old alcoholic prostitute, gave him up for adoption when he was born. He was adopted by local residents Nicholas and Frances Bianchi. Though his upbringing was stable, Bianchi became a pathological liar early in his childhood and spent a lot of time daydreaming. The latter was attributed to petit mal seizures when he was 5. He also had a short fuse and was diagnosed with passive-aggressive personality disorder. Bianchi was unable to sleep and wet the bed frequently as a child. Red flag. Though he had a high IQ of 116, he was an underachiever in school.
So this is interesting. They weren't actually genetically related since he was adopted.
I guess not. We did say they were biological cousins, but it sounds like they were not. In 1957, his mother, in an attempt to change his bad behavior, sent him to a private Catholic elementary school. In July of 1963, he pulled down a 6-year-old girl's pants, having just spontaneously decided that he liked doing so. Following his father's death from pneumonia in 1964, an unemotional Bianchi had to leave the private school and attend a public high school. There, he dated a lot and joined a motorcycle club. After graduating in 1971, he married his high school sweetheart, Brenda Beck, but they divorced after only 8 months. Deciding that he wanted to become a police officer, Bianchi enrolled at Monroe Community College to study police science and psychology, but dropped out of college after just 1 term. He applied for a position at the sheriff's department, but was rejected. He took on a series of menial jobs, eventually becoming a security guard at a jewelry store, from which he was fired for stealing and giving the loot to his various girlfriends. This habit stuck with him through a series of jobs. In 1975, he moved to California and moved in with his cousin, Angelo Buono, who taught him how to use a fake police badge to extort free sex from prostitutes. Bianchi applied for jobs at 2 different local police departments, but neither had any open positions. He got a job at a title company and spent his first paycheck on an apartment and a Cadillac. When the killer team first reconnected as adults, Buono decided they should pursue careers as pimps. However, neither had much business knowledge and their enterprise quickly failed. After 2 sex workers, Sabra Hanan and Becky Spears, managed to escape, the men were furious and became totally unhinged. Let's take a quick break before we get into the sadistic murders of the Hillside Strangler.
Are you planning an event with audio and visual needs but are not sure where to start? Waves Entertainment can help. Waves Entertainment is your premier full-service management company with high-quality custom solutions for any size event. Whether you are planning a large festival or concert, a corporate meeting or wedding, Waves Entertainment will power your event to excellence. Our team of industry professionals work closely with your vision to ensure your audience hears every word, sees every detail, and remembers the experience. Our goal is to ensure your event is customized to fit your needs and provide professional-grade equipment to amplify your message. From live stage production and talent booking to vendor coordination, event staffing, and more, Waves Entertainment is your one-stop shop for the perfect event. Visit our website, wavesentertainment.com, or give us a call at 704-662-2435. That's 704-662-2435. Waves Entertainment, powering your event to excellence.
Now back to the show.
The cousins began trying to kidnap girls by posing as police officers with little luck. When a sex worker sold the pair a bogus list of male clients, the angry, controlling men responded violently by murdering their first victim, which was the woman's friend, Yolanda Washington. This is what began the duo's killing spree that ultimately claimed 10 lives.
Although some believe more.
Most of the victims were killed at Buono's Glendale, California automobile upholstery shop. The victims' bodies were cleaned there and dumped in secluded areas around suburban Los Angeles. Each victim was strangled and sexually assaulted prior to their death. After the press started to realize that a series of strangulation murders were connected, they dubbed the killer the Hillside Strangler, based on the idea that a lone murderer was running through the city, choking women to death, and leaving them to rot in wooded areas. However, police didn't think they were dealing with a single madman. The intricate crime scenes signaled the existence of 2 killers. After each kill, Bianchi and Buono arranged the bodies of their victims in provocative positions. It was this kind of attention to detail that gave the cops pause. One victim was positioned so her legs formed a V, framing City Hall and LAPD headquarters.
That is so horrendous and deranged. Jeez.
Upon visiting a crime scene between Glendale and Eagle Rock, LAPD Homicide Detective Sergeant Bob Grogan realized the victims weren't murdered in the same place they were dumped. Grogan later recalled, quote, "We felt that this was a 2-man operation. The bodies were being carried from point A to point B. It would have taken 2 to do it," unquote.
The killers changed their MO midway through their rampage. The Hillside Stranglers' first victims were sex workers, but before too long, they began abducting young women indiscriminately. As their choices grew less calculated, the public began to take notice of the rash of murders happening across the city.
Neither Bianchi nor Buono ever explained why they changed their pattern, but judging from Bianchi's obsession with overpowering everyone in his life, mentally and physically, it's likely he was looking for a challenge. When the bodies of middle-class women who weren't sex workers began showing up around Thanksgiving in 1977, the LAPD started paying close attention. They put together a task force specifically focused on catching the Hillside Strangler.
Yes, and this team contained the same police officers who hunted Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, a decade later.
By December 1977, the Stranglers were tempting fate with every new murder. At one point, Bianchi called an escort service from a payphone in a Los Angeles library, claiming to be a married photographer who wanted to take some provocative photos while his wife was away. The agency dispatched 17-year-old Kimberly Diane Martin to an empty apartment in the Tamarind complex where Bianchi lived with his girlfriend Kelly. When she arrived, Bianchi and Buono were lying in wait. No one knows exactly what happened to Kimberly when she entered the apartment, but the autopsy report shows signs of massive head trauma, leading police to believe the men smashed her head into a wall during their torture session.
Bianchi had a girlfriend? I mean, how? And I guess she wasn't there at the time of Kimberly's murder.
I know, but it was noted that his girlfriend refused to marry him, so I guess that counts for something.
You're listening to an episode of Enmeshed on True Crime by Indie Drop-In. We're going to take a quick break. And now back to this episode of Enmeshed.
For whatever reason, the Hillside Strangler disposed of their final victim, 20-year-old Cindy Lee Hudspeth, in a shockingly most heinous fashion. Rather than dump her body in a sparsely populated area, they shoved it into the trunk of her car, which they then pushed off a cliff on the Angeles Crest Highway. A helicopter spotted the orange Datsun on February 17, 1978. When police found Cindy's body, they realized she'd been bound, sexually assaulted, and tortured before the men finally strangled her to death.
So shortly after giving birth to a son named Ryan, in early 1978, Bianchi's said girlfriend, Kelly Boyd, moved from Los Angeles to Bellingham, Washington to be closer to her family and escape the increasingly erratic Bianchi. He followed her, apparently hoping a change of scenery would help him turn over a new leaf. Unfortunately, it didn't, and that's why we're here today.
When Bianchi arrived in Washington, he decided to make the change from criminal to cop and applied to be a reserve deputy for the Whatcom County Sheriff's Department. They didn't hire him, so he took a job as a security guard. Feeling a lack of fulfillment, Bianchi's thoughts returned to the subject of murder. This time, his gaze fell on two college-age women, Diane Wilder and Karen Mandick. On Thursday, January 11th, 1979, Bianchi allegedly offered the girls each $100 to keep an eye on a sprawling ranch house in Edgemoor, Washington for a couple of hours.
So they're con men too.
The next afternoon, the women's bodies were discovered in a green Mercury Bobcat, both victims of strangulation. Bianchi attempted to play it cool, but he couldn't fight the landslide of evidence forming against him. On Friday, January 26, 1979, Bianchi was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
Nice. Thankfully, he was quickly caught after these murders.
Once authorities arrested Bianchi for killing the 2 women in Washington, it was only a matter of time before they connected him to the Hillside Strangler murders due to his California ID and the similarities of the murders. Rather than face the charges alone, he pleaded guilty and immediately offered up his cousin Buono in order to take the death penalty off the table. After Bianchi was locked up in jail, he found himself the object of Veronica Compton's affection.
Damn it. No. Why, women? Why?
There's always one. Compton was obsessed with serial killers, and the pair quickly worked out a scheme to get the cousins out of prison. Bianchi asked Veronica to visit Bellingham, Washington, strangle a young woman to death, and plant non-secretor semen on the body. Compton immediately said yes, because why would you not in that situation?
What the hell is wrong with people? So a non-secretor is someone who, through their own genetics, carries a gene which inhibits them from secreting their ABO blood type in their secretions, such as saliva and semen. Only 15% of the population are non-secretors. So, good try, Veronica.
If only our listeners knew how many times we had to stop this so you could say non-secretor properly.
It was tough.
That was a rough one.
I could write it just fine, but anyway.
After receiving a plastic glove full of Bianchi semen, she went to Washington and started looking for a woman to kill. After making plans to meet up with a woman in a motel room, Veronica got loaded on booze and cocaine. When the woman arrived, Veronica tried to strangle her, but the potential victim was too strong and fought her off. After that, Veronica quietly tiptoed back to California. Buono's trial ended up costing $1 million, California's most expensive legal trial until the respective trials of Charles Ng and O.J. Simpson decades later. Proceedings featured 392 witnesses, 1,807 exhibits, and the transcript of the case ran close to 56,000 pages. Aside from being expensive, there were plenty of other oddities present in Buono's trial. In order to drive their point home, prosecutors took the jurors to each of the spots where the stranglers left victims.
I like it because so many people need visuals to comprehend what happened.
Agree. In response, the defense called Veronica Compton, the woman who tried to murder someone for Bianchi, to testify in Buono's defense. Among other things, she claimed partial responsibility for the murders, suggesting Buono was not involved.
Cray-cray.
In exchange for pleading guilty to the 2 murders in Washington and providing evidence that helped put Buono away, Bianchi avoided the death penalty, getting off with life in prison. At Buono's trial, the jury, against the judge's wishes because he wanted the death penalty, sentenced Buono to life in prison as well. As of today, Bianchi is still behind bars in Walla Walla, Washington. Since his arrival, he miraculously found God and allegedly became a minister, received an Associates of Arts degree, followed by a bachelor's degree in science and law, and in 1989 married his pen pal, Shirley Joyce.
Oh, again, how sweet.
What a love story. Additionally, Bianchi has become extremely litigious. In 1992, he sued a playing card manufacturer for using his likeness on a set of true crime cards. Initially, he claimed having his face on a card hurt his chance for appeal, and he later said, quote, "They appropriated my face to make money. They breached my copyright," unquote. The judge ruled in the favor of the trading card company.
Bianchi also claimed he had multiple personality disorder. After authorities arrested Bianchi for murdering 2 young women in Washington, he claimed his multiple personality disorder had an evil alter ego named Steve.
It's always Steve. Damn it, Steve.
Yeah, Steve killed the girls. Allegedly, Bianchi had watched Sybil, the 1976 made-for-TV movie starring Sally Field as a woman with 16 distinct personalities, and so he felt inspired.
Unfortunately for Bianchi, he wasn't a great actor. During sessions with psychologist Dr. John Watkins, he routinely referred to Steve as he instead of I, which went against the typical manifestations of his supposed disease. While he eventually pled guilty to murder, it wasn't the end of his imagined disorders. On July 6, 1981, during Buono's trial, Bianchi tried to get the whole case thrown out by claiming he wasn't sure he was telling the truth when he said Buono helped commit the murders. According to Bianchi, he lied about having multiple personality disorder, but legitimately wasn't in control of his own facilities. As far as he knew, he may not have been involved either. Bianchi's play was gutsy, but the court was definitely not convinced.
Again, good try. Bianchi wasn't the only Hillside Strangler to find love after going to prison. Another love story. In 1986, Buono married Christine Kazuka, a mother of 3 and supervisor at the Los Angeles office of the State Employment Development Department. You might like to hear that due to the nature of his crimes, he never received a conjugal visit.
In 2002, Angelo Buono Jr. died at the age of 67 in the Calipatria State Prison near Palm Springs, California. Officials believe he died of natural causes as they found no sign of a struggle. After hearing about Buono's demise, Robert Filibosian, a California prosecutor who was active at the time of the Strangler murders, told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "Oh, good. God works in mysterious ways. The death penalty has finally been administered by a higher power than the County of Los Angeles," unquote. From start to finish, Kenneth Bianchi believed he was smarter and better than everyone involved: his victims, his partner, his girlfriend, and especially the police.
Of course, as any true narcissistic psychopath would.
Interestingly, Bianchi's ego inflated noticeably when police questioned him about the murder of 17-year-old sex worker Kimberly Diane Martin, who was killed in Bianchi's apartment complex. At the time of the murder, Bianchi was running a scam on his girlfriend. Kelly thought he had cancer, but he was happy to speak with detectives about the murder, whatever he could do to help. He empathized with their need to interview all the building's tenants and calmly explained he was not at home the night of the murder. Bianchi's acting worked that time, and the police stopped considering him a suspect. Allegedly, he was one of the easiest residents to interview.
Seriously?
In his final words to the court, the presiding judge, Ronald George, cursed the rules that kept him from sentencing them to death. Quote, "Angelo Buono and Kenneth Bianchi slowly squeezed out of their victims their last breath of air and their promise for a future life. And all for what? The momentary sadistic thrill of enjoying a brief, perverted sexual satisfaction and the venting of their hatred for women. If ever there was a case where the death penalty is appropriate, this is the case," unquote. Bianchi, who will be eligible for parole in 2025, once said, and I 99% quote, "Why is it wrong to get rid of some fucking CUNTS, see you next Tuesday, S," unquote.
Yes. What a jerk. Therefore, Bianchi, we will name all of the victims that this duo brutally murdered together. They were humans who never deserved to die. First was Yolanda Washington. Her naked body was found on October 17th, 1977, on a hillside near the Ventura Freeway.
Judith Miller. On November 1st, 1977, police were called to Alta Terrace Drive in La Crescenta, a neighborhood 12 miles north of downtown Los Angeles, where the body of a petite teenage girl was found naked, face up on a parkway in a middle-class residential area.
21-year-old Lisa Caston was found 5 days later, on November 6, 1977, near the Chevy Chase Country Club in Glendale.
At some point in early November 1977, the two men approached 24-year-old Catherine Lore Baker, the daughter of actor Peter Lore, famous for his role as a serial killer in Fritz Lang's film M, with the intent of abducting and killing her. However, when they found a picture of her sitting on her father's lap among her identification, they let her go without incident, fearing the murder of a celebrity's child may attract an unusually high amount of police and press attention. Lore did not realize who the men were until they were arrested, at which point she recalled that two men flashing LA police badges had approached her in the past.
Dolores Cepeda and Sonia Johnson. On Sunday, November 13th, 1977, two girls, 12-year-old Dolores Ann Dolly Cepeda and 14-year-old Sonia Marie Johnson, boarded an RTD bus in front of the Eagle Rock Plaza on Colorado Boulevard and headed home. The last time they were seen was getting off the bus on York Boulevard and North Avenue 46 and approaching a two-tone sedan that reportedly had two men inside. Their two corpses were discovered by a 9-year-old boy who was treasure hunting in a trash heap on a hillside near Dodger Stadium on November 20th, 1977. both of the girls' bodies had already begun to decompose. It was determined that they had been strangled and raped.
Christina Weckler. Earlier that same day, November 20th, 1977, hikers found the naked body of 20-year-old Christina Weckler, a quiet honors student at the Art Center College of Design.
Evelyn Jane King. On November 23, 1977, the badly decomposed body of 28-year-old Evelyn Jane King, an aspiring actress who had gone missing on November 9th, was discovered in bushes near the Los Feliz Boulevard off-ramp of the Golden State Freeway.
Lauren Wagner. On November 29, 1977, police found the body of 18-year-old Lauren Ray Wagner, a business student who lived with her parents in the San Fernando Valley, in the hills around Los Angeles' Mount Washington.
Kimberly Martin. On December 14, 1977, the naked body of 17-year-old sex worker Kimberly Diane Martin was found on a deserted lot near Los Angeles City Hall.
Cindy Hudspeth. The body of the final Hillside Strangler victim was discovered in Los Angeles on February 17, 1978, when a helicopter pilot spotted an orange Datsun abandoned midway down a cliff on the Angeles Crest Highway. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next Monday for a new episode of Enmeshed.
And remember, don't conform to the family norm.
Thank you for listening. All of our sources are in today's show notes, as well as those important resources. You can find us at enmeshed_true crime podcast on Instagram or enmeshed true crime podcast on Facebook, and let us know what you think. You can also get a behind-the-scenes look at the show and chat with us about any of the cases you've heard here, or share case suggestions. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to keep up with Enmeshed, and join us every Monday for fresh takes on stale relationships. Enmeshed is an Oh No production.
Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In Network. If you would like to nominate a true crime podcast to be featured, just send me a tweet at Indie Drop-In. I'd also love to hear if one of our featured podcasts is now your favorite show. Indie Drop-In survives off ad revenue and listener donations. If you would like to contribute, please consider buying me a coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Indie Drop-In. If you look at the very bottom of the episode description, I put a link in there to make it really easy. Indie Drop-In has many other shows that you also might like. Just go to indiedropin.com. All right, see you next week.